There are places in Canada you'll never find on a tourist map. Places that were built to hide suffering, silence screams, and lock away what society didn't want to see. Most are abandoned now, but not empty, not quiet. Behind sealed doors and crumbling walls, something still stirs. These are the 5 places in Canada you were never meant to see. Hidden among the trees in Coquitlam, British Columbia, the sprawling Riverview Hospital opened its doors in 1913 as Essendale Hospital. Meant to house and treat the mentally ill, it quickly grew into a vast complex of over 80 buildings. But as time passed, its halls became a symbol of neglect and sorrow. Once celebrated for progressive psychiatric care, Riverview eventually fell victim to underfunding, overcrowding, and outdated treatments. Patients, sometimes numbering in the thousands, were subjected to electroshock therapy, lobotomies, and heavy sedation. By the 1990s, the facility began closing in phases, and the last building was shuttered in 2012. But even now, people say the hospital never truly closed. Security guards won't patrol the upper wings of the West Lawn Pavilion. They talk about the Whisper Hall, a 3rd-floor corridor with flickering lights that always blow out when someone walks through. One guard swore he saw a patient, barefoot, in a hospital gown, standing at the far end, unmoving. When he approached, the hallway stretched longer, impossibly long, and the whispering began. Dozens of voices, chanting, laughing, sobbing. He ran. When he reached the elevator, it was already open. Inside stood the same patient, eyes black, mouth wide open, but silent. They say his hair turned white by the time he reached the lobby. They transferred him the next day. He never spoke again. Perched on the shores of Lake Ontario, the Rockwood Asylum for the Criminally Insane opened in 1859. Designed by architect William Coverdale, it was intended to be a progressive institution for those deemed criminally insane. However, the reality within its limestone walls was far from humane. Overcrowding, underfunding, and outdated treatments plagued the facility. Patients were subjected to isolation, rudimentary medical procedures, and often neglected. The asylum operated for over a century before closing its doors in the 2000s, leaving behind a legacy of suffering and despair. Locals speak of the echoing hall, a corridor where footsteps never align with one's own. A former night guard recounted hearing cries for help, only to find empty cells. One night, he followed the sounds to a locked room. Inside, he saw a figure hunched in the corner, whispering incoherently. When he turned on his flashlight, the room was empty, yet the whispers grew louder, echoing his deepest fears. They say the walls of Rockwood absorbed the anguish of its inhabitants, and now they whisper it back to anyone who dares to listen. Perched on the slopes of Mount Royal in Montreal, the Allen Memorial Institute was once a beacon of psychiatric advancement. Built inside the lavish mansion known as Ravenscrag, the institute began operating in 1943. But behind its ornate stone walls, dark secrets were unfolding. During the 1950s and 60s, Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron conducted experiments under the CIA's MKULTRA program, an attempt to control the human mind. Patients were subjected to forced comas, high-voltage electroshock therapy, and endless loops of taped messages. Many left with permanent amnesia, others never recovered. The mansion still stands, but some say the experiments never truly ended. Staff whisper about Room 502, a room that doesn't appear on any blueprints. One cleaner claimed she wandered into it during her shift and found a patient strapped to a gurney. Only, the hospital had been empty for years. When she blinked, the walls pulsed like skin. The patient turned to her and said, "They're still recording." She ran, but every hallway led her back to the same door. She awoke outside the mansion's gates, clothes torn, fingernails cracked. She never spoke again. Some nights, a light flickers in the highest window of Ravenscrag, and faint voices play, like tape loops, over and over. The Whitby Psychiatric Hospital opened in 1916, designed as a cottage-style mental health facility, a series of small buildings spread across a large property. It was considered more humane at the time, but as decades passed, reports of abuse, neglect, and experimental procedures began to surface. The hospital shut down in the 1990s, and while the main grounds were redeveloped, some of the original buildings and underground tunnels remain, sealed and hidden. Urban explorers still sneak into the ruins, and not all of them come back out the same. A group of students once entered through a basement grate, looking for the legendary tunnel that connected all buildings. They found it. As they walked deeper, the lights they brought flickered and died. One of them said they saw figures ahead, walking slowly, bound together by their arms, whispering. When they ran, the tunnel changed behind them. Doors that weren't there before, screaming vents, blood-smeared arrows pointing in circles. Only 2 made it back. The third was found weeks later, sitting silently near the woods, whispering to herself, "They keep walking down there. They never stop." Founded in 1873, the Saint-Jean-de-Dieu Hospital, now the Institut Universitaire en Santé Mentale de Montréal, was once the largest asylum in Quebec. At its peak, it housed over 5,000 patients, many of whom were left there for life. Conditions were harsh, and many patients died anonymously. In 1890 alone, over 500 bodies were buried in unmarked graves on the grounds. Records were lost, their names forgotten. Today, most of the old buildings have been replaced, but some wards remain, and so do the stories. Nurses talk about the shadow bed in the old palliative wing, bed 33. Cameras set up for monitoring always shut off between 2:11 and 2:13 a.m. During those 2 minutes, nurses report hearing wheels turning and voices calling from the hallway. One nurse stayed behind to watch. She saw the empty bed shift, as if someone sat on it. The sheet pressed down. Then, the whisper, "Why did they forget me?" Her hair turned gray within a week.